Okay, welcome everyone. We will get started with a meditation. Before we meditate, welcome to everybody who's with us for the first time. Against the Stream meets regularly. There's several classes a week. I teach every Monday night, both live here in Venice and via Zoom for everyone at home. Can't make it out either because you live in other places or not ready to risk gathering. Small gatherings here at Against the Stream, no more than 10 people or so are showing up. So we're appropriately social distanced and wearing masks for the most part. I don't wear a mask while I teach, but I've been teaching this Monday night class for over 15 years here in Los Angeles, and before that in New York, and before that in San Francisco, and before that in Santa Cruz. Over 20 years now, I've been doing a weekly class somewhere around, and happy to continue doing it. My feeling is so important to gather regularly and practice together and to discuss the Buddha's Dharma. There's a place that I'm reminded of in the early teachings where the Buddha says something like, as long as people gather regularly to practice together, Sangha, this word that means community, as long as we keep getting together. And originally, Buddhism was meant to solely be an oral tradition. You originally weren't allowed to write it down. No books about Buddhism. You weren't allowed to read about it, only to hear about it from people who had experienced it, had been practicing it and developing it and learning it, and then we're passing it on. Technology is so amazing that now you can do that even if you're not in the same place as a teacher, and you have access to communities, sanghas, and teachers virtually through the internet. So we are able to do that in a way that we didn't used to. Certainly when I was practicing in the early years, the thing was to get the cassette tapes of Dharma talks that people had given. And but you can never get it live, it's kind of recorded Dharma talks. And now you can kind of open up the internet any day of the week and catch a live Dharma teaching. And I think it's in that same vein of gathering regularly to discuss, even if we can't be in the same room together all of the time. So again, I want to welcome everybody, anybody that's new. Welcome back to the rest of you, the rest of the community who sit together regularly on Monday nights. And we'll have a period of meditation. I'll offer some instructions, some guidance. Feel free to follow along with the instructions that I'm giving, or if you feel quite comfortable with your own practice, maybe you're working on a certain practice, maybe you've committed to forgiveness practice this month, or loving kindness, or some form of mindfulness, feel free to do your own practice and kind of tune me out. But if you care to follow along, I offer basic mindfulness meditation instructions based on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, with my own little bit of twist in there, where I might throw in some attitude of loving kindness and compassion, forgiveness into the spirit of the mindfulness. And then after the sitting period, we'll have a talk and discussion about Buddhism, some aspect. I'm going to talk about attachment tonight and non-attachment, and the usual topic that we talk about every week for the last 30 years, and we'll keep talking about for the next 30 years. So find a way to sit that's upright, relaxed, a meditative posture where we establish the posture, gently, relaxed, allowing the eyes to be closed and the attention. We establish mindfulness, present time, non-judgmental, kind, accepting awareness of the present experience in the body. And consciously establish friendliness, the intention to be kind, to be accepting, to be patient, tolerant with your own mind, your own body, your own experience in meditation. Release any unnecessary tension in the body. Soften the brow, the jaw, shoulders. As you exhale, soften your belly. Let go of any holding, any tightness in the stomach. We settle in and bring attention into the body. There are 6 areas of phenomena of experience. The mind that remembers and plans, judges and fears, but also cares and loves. The world of thought and emotion. Part of this human body. There are sounds, both internal and external. Smell and taste. Images, even with the eyes closed. The experience of seeing, shape, color, darkness, consciousness like it's projected on a screen. Mental images seen in the mind's eye. And all of the physical sensations from the top of our head down through our face and shoulder and arms, trunk of the body, buttocks, genitals, legs, feet. This physical form, body, sensations. The mind thinks, the ears hear, the nose smells, the tongue tastes, the eyes see, and the body feels. We spend some time establishing mindfulness in the body, with the body, feeling the sensations that the breath creates. As you breathe in, receive the breath, know the breath is coming in. As you breathe out, know that you breathe out. Feel the sensations created by each breath. No need to control it. The effort is into putting our attention on what's already happening without manipulating it. Most likely the mind continues to think. The ears continue to hear. We try to let that be in the background as we give our attention to the breath as the foreground, as the focus, as the anchor to the present time experience. kind awareness of the body breathing, of the mind thinking, of the sounds, smells, tastes. We use the breath as a home base, as a focus. But the practice becomes inclusive, not just the breath, but the whole body. All the sense doors, the mind itself, the emotions, the totality of your being, your humanness, received in non-judgmental awareness. With as much friendliness, acceptance, kindness as we can meet this moment with. These thoughts, these feelings, these aches, cravings, or desires. All of the Dharma, the truth about reality, nature, revealed right here in our own direct experience. The truth of suffering, difficulty, pain, grief, sorrow, revealed in our own minds and hearts. It's like this. Sometimes it's so painful, so difficult. The cause of suffering revealed. The way that we respond, we react to pleasure, to pain, the craving, the aversion. The way that we tend to take everything personal. I, me, mine, causing suffering. And also the end of suffering, nibbana, the extinguishing of greed and hatred and delusion right here in our own minds, our own bodies, our own hearts. Not a theory or a belief, but a experience. Each moment that we let go, each moment that we respond with kindness, with compassion, ending the suffering. think it's a good practice, good habit to get into after we've finished a period of meditation, to take a moment to contemplate what just happened, where your attention was, what your body was experiencing, what your heart was doing, what your mind was thinking about. Was there a general sense of difficulty or ease, struggle, resistance, craving, aversion, or an ability to accept, to be friendly, to befriend your own experience? Mindfulness is asking us, encouraging us to develop non-judgmental awareness. So even as we reflect, we're not judging the experience as good or bad. We're just trying to see clearly, it was like this. Some thoughts about the future or the past, and some resistance, some craving, some anger, some fear, some lust, some love, some kindness, some appreciation, whatever came through, without judging any of it. Just the whole goal, as far as I can tell, is to see clearly and respond appropriately. So often, I think people kind of fuck ourselves up by thinking that the goal is for our experience to be a certain way. It should be like this. I should feel kind all of the time. I should feel compassionate or friendly, or thinking that we should feel some certain way or be comfortable, rather than really simply just, may I see how uncomfortable I am? First, may I see how much resistance I have to all of the unpleasant experiences that happen. Then we have the ability to start responding more appropriately, more wisely. My I don't know how to start this other than just like, I said in the meditation instruction that the body, which includes the mind, the heart, so this whole human experience, will reveal all of the nature of the mind and body, all of what's called the Dharma, the Dhamma, truth. That rather than Buddhism being something that we learn, it's something that we experience by turning our attention on ourselves. Turn your attention on your own mind, on your own body, on your own heart, and see what's going on in here. Ultimately, actually, mindfulness is both internal and external, right? We don't want to get so focused in here that we're not paying attention to what's going on out there. But the reality is we've spent most of our life so focused on what's going on out there in the world and the game of blame and craving that we've never really, until we start meditating, most of us haven't ever really paused enough to say, like, what's really going on in here? What's my mind doing? So I want to talk about attachment and non-attachment, and I'm going to start with a statement, a proposal. And it's that every form of suffering in our lives, everything that we're suffering about, is because we're attached to something or another. Everything, all of our suffering, right? This is the Buddha's second noble truth. The cause of human suffering is clinging, is craving, is attachment. So just reflecting for a moment on all of the ways you've been suffering lately. The top 20 manifestations of unhappiness, of stress, of difficulty, of anxiousness, of fear, of, the umbrella term that we use is just suffering. And suffering covers everything from minor stresses, our suffering, to huge dilemmas and major dilemmas in our life, really heart-wrenching difficulties, which are also suffering. It all comes back to clinging. And rather than, this being a idea or a philosophy or a teaching, it's why we meditate, so that we can see that for ourselves. And as you look at your own mind, you're mindful of your own body and your emotions, and you can identify for yourself the truth that everything that I'm suffering about is because I'm craving, clinging, attached. Now, I want to back up, and maybe I should have started here, which was, I think that that's all true. I believe, my own mind has revealed that to me. My own meditation practice has revealed this to me as true, that all of my suffering is caused by my own attachment, by how I'm reacting to, it's not what's happening, it's how I'm clinging, craving, aversive, attached to what's happening. Attachment covers both craving and aversion, right? Attached to it being different than it is, or it staying the way that it is, which also is delusional cause of suffering. What I want to back up to is the thing that I love about the way that the Buddha teaches, and this whole kind of what we call Buddhism, is that it normalizes it, and that we can have this conversation And I can see a bunch of people in the room going like, yep. And a bunch of people at home on Zoom going, yep. And that we can all, like, it's so simple. Of course. And I don't know, for me, I like that part of what's being said here is that it's not your fault. It's tricky, right? On one level, I am saying it's all your fault. Your suffering is 100% your fault. It's all your attachment is causing your suffering. Nobody else's attachment is causing your suffering. Yours. But the fact that we're all attached is the human condition. It's not personal. It's not at all our fault. Being born into a human mind and body is being born into craving and clinging and aversion and self-centeredness. So you follow me, right? Like, it's not our fault at all that being human means to be attached, means to be aversive, means to be self-centered, means to suffer. First noble truth, existence, life is going to come with, not all of life is suffering, but there's going to be all of this craving and clinging and grief and sorrow and stress and anger, and it's just part of the package. Took birth into it. It's normal, status quo. Without a really radical intervention, it's like we're all diehard junkies. I don't know. Some of us were actually diehard junkies, but like all humanity are diehard addicts for pleasure, clinging, greed, hatred, delusion. And without rehabilitation, without a radical intervention, we're going to die of miserable. We're going to live a life of suffering, craving, clinging. We're going to cause all of this suffering. But this is where the Dharma, like there's this, all of these teachings about like what a precious opportunity we have. That we've come into contact with a transformative, practical, applicable, we have the tools to intervene, to get clean, to recover our true nature, our Buddha nature, to wake the fuck up is possible. But the proposal itself is so fucking radical that the Buddha was like, I don't know, nobody's gonna. After his awakening, he wasn't convinced. He's like, I woke up, but that shit was hard. I had to go against my own natural tendencies to crave, to cling, to take everything personal. He's like, I meditated my ass off. He's like, and this was really, it was subtle, it was difficult, I had never met anybody in the world that didn't suffer, but I thought maybe it was possible. Some confidence, some at least curiosity, some interest, some hope. He said, but this goes so counter to the human instinct. How am I going to get people to shut up and sit down and look at their own minds long enough to see for themselves what's causing their unhappiness, their suffering? I feel very grateful that he made the decision to take a shot at it and say, and that original, the way that it's reported anyways, it's like, well, maybe there'll be a handful of radicals in each generation who will be willing to face their pain, that will be willing to break the addiction to self, that will be willing to try to be ethical and wise and see clearly, break there's that image that's used he said, I teach the Dharma for those with little dust in their eyes, those who are only slightly dusted. But he didn't have any hope for humanity. I know that a lot of people don't want to hear that people are like, well, aren't we going to save all living beings? That's what the Bodhisattvas say. My sense of early Buddhism is the Buddha was like, no, like people are fucked. Because it's so hard to not suffer. Suffering is our nature. Dukkha, clinging, attachment. So hard to not be attached. Just think about all of the things you're attached to. First, start with the internal list of attachments. My views, my opinions, my beliefs, my personality, my thoughts, my feelings, my, I, me, mine. And it's not just because we are like extra self-centered. It's just the human, maybe I'm extra self-centered, I don't know, but I think it's just the human condition. I'm not in your mind, so I don't know how self-centered you are, but I know that my mind is incredibly self-centered. It wants to think about itself most of the time. Even after decades of trying to train it to be more kind and more generous and more thoughtful and more loving towards others. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still pretty insistent that my views are important. And then think of all the things external that we're attached to. Our status, our image, what other people think of us. Do you care are you attached? What other people think of you? What our place in the tribe, in the world? How about attached to what other people do? How about attached to justice, to equality, to what's right? How much are you suffering these days about politics? About people who have views that aren't right? How dare they? I'm gonna suffer at those fuckers that are wrong. Attached to it being different. The world shouldn't be this way. It's 2020. We should have wisdom and equality and
wake the fuck up.
Wake the fuck up. And how much are we suffering about, right? I suffer about it. I don't want to suffer about it. I guess this is a big question. How committed are we to not suffering? Or do you have some reservations about some things are worth suffering about? It's okay to, this is where Buddhism is so radical, where, he's just saying nothing is worth suffering about. even injustice. It's worth caring about, it's worth loving, it's worth acting for justice, for equality, for radical transformation, even social, political, environment, like activism, for sure. Engagement, for sure. But it's not worth suffering about. It's not worth being attached to a certain outcome, even though you care and you want to work for a positive change on this planet, a positive change inside you, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your culture, in your society, in your planet, in the environment. But it's not worth suffering about. I meet people quite often. I have these conversations with a lot of people, and a lot of people will admit, and maybe you're some of those people that will admit, I know there's some stuff that I'm just going to hold on to. I'm just going to continue to keep suffering. I'm just going to keep suffering about this issue or that issue or this or that. Now, Buddhism, I think, is for everyone, the path, everyone's welcome. But really, what the guy was saying is, if you really want to get free, if you really want to be happy, for lack of a better word, you got to let go of everything. Now, this is where I want to get to, like, the topic of non-attachment. What does it mean to let go? And what's the difference between non-attachment and detachment and avoidance and what is that, like dissociation or dismissiveness or complacency, or, you know, because there's all of these things that can masquerade as non-attachment, but they're not really non-attachment. They're, you know, kind of avoidance, or they're suppression, or they're ignoring. Now, the non-attachment that we're going for is fully engaged and connected with all of the pain and all of the joy and all of the, yeah, and even just saying that, I just pause in, I feel like most of us be like, oh yeah, that's really painful. So I'd like to not be attached to that because that's really painful. But wait a minute, I have to let go of the joy too? I don't want to let go of the pleasant stuff. I want to hold on to that. I want to cling to those moments of joy. Passion. I want to continue to be passionate. There is I don't know what the Pali word is, but that's often translated as an encouragement to be dispassionate. I fucking hate that one. Dispassionate. It sounds like disengaged, sounds like avoidance or something, but it's not. Like, what is meant by that dispassionate is being connected without clinging. And it's so counter to our instinctual drives, to our survival instincts. Mindfulness is the intervention. Not only mindfulness, also renunciation. the 5 precepts, for instance, are the kind of minimal level of renunciation that we're encouraged to practice. Again, like all of this is open offering. You don't have to do anything. There's no rules. There's just a whole bunch of like encouragement. Here's the directions. If you want to go that direction, here's how to get there. Now you can find your own way if you want. Take as many detours as you'd like. But if you're not following these directions, you'll probably never get there. You can wander through the desert for as many years as you want. But here's a map. And the map is turn inward, mindfulness, present time, non-judgmental awareness, which will show you the impermanent nature of everything. Every thought, every feeling, every sensation, every emotion, every sound, every Harley Davidson that passes by. Arise and pass. Mindfulness will reveal that because of impermanence, there's no certainty, there's no safety, there's no reliable external refuge. There's no ground. There's no security. Whenever I say that, I think of that title of the Alan Watts book, which I still haven't read, even though I've been quoting it for decades. I just like the title, The Wisdom of Insecurity. And that's part of what, the more we pay attention, the more we see there's no security, because everything's impermanent. How could an impermanent experience be a secure experience? And the more we pay attention to the impermanent and the unsatisfactory or unreliable or insecure reality, both internal and external, the more we also see how impersonal. It's just not self. What the mind does, not your fault, not who you are. So we see this both internally and externally, and I lost my train. I was going somewhere with that, but I'll have to come back to this equation that we have, which is quite simple. Let go. Stop clinging. Oh, I know. I was trying to talk about the precepts. So mindfulness intervention, for sure, we have to do it to see clearly. We train the mind. The untrained mind, not trustworthy. It gives us a whole bunch of misinformation. The more we train the mind, the more it becomes trustworthy. And many of you probably caught my talk last week from the road from New Orleans, where I was talking about this great dilemma that we have around, even when we've been training the mind for years, still sometimes hard to tell what thoughts are trustworthy and which ones are Buddha mind, awakened seeing clearly, and which ones are Mara, masquerading as, right, as wisdom, where it's just more judgments and clinging to views and opinions. And so part of the non-attachment, the let go, is also letting go of violence. The first precept, which is killing, at the grossest level of the harm that we cause, killing other living beings, a practice of renunciation that says, the more I pay attention to my own desire for happiness, for existence, for survival, the more I know I share that with all living beings, including the fruit flies that I want to kill because they're buzzing around my bananas, or the whatever insects or the mosquitoes that are going to bite me, my body. And then I am going to be so inconvenienced for 3 to 7 days of itching, a mosquito bite. And I hate that little fucker. I'm going to murder him. Maybe a whole genocide of insects. So that level of non-attachment, first precept, letting go of violence, of killing. Of course, on the human realm, but the Buddha's teaching is way beyond just us not murdering each other or physically hurting each other, but taking the animals and the insects and the fish and the, into our heart, into our practice, into a view of compassion, of seeing that we are interconnected, interrelated with all living beings. And that all living beings desire to not be harmed, just like you don't want to be killed. And yes, we could get into an argument about survival instinct in humans who have consciousness and fear and all of that stuff, and that maybe tiny insects don't have quite the same consciousness that humans have. And it's true, of course, there's different levels. But a sentient being is any being that has a nervous system and experiences pain and has a survival instinct and doesn't want to be harmed. And the practice of renunciation, of non-attachment, taking it as an opportunity, like maybe I won't kill these fruit flies. Maybe I won't be so attached to having a kitchen free from fruit flies. Maybe maybe I'll, put the bananas in the freezer and, let them die a natural death rather than murdering them. They only live for like 24 hours anyways. Like, clean the kitchen, it'll be good tomorrow. The second precept, to be honest, to not steal. 2 precepts around honesty, not stealing, not lying. A precept about being careful with our sexuality, not causing harm, not engaging with people that we shouldn't be engaging with. People that are married, people that are in commitments, people that are not of the appropriate age. And Buddhist sexuality is pretty liberal, consenting adults. Honest communication about sex. It's not asking for celibacy for us householders. It's not saying you have to get married. It's not saying you have to be in commitments. It's not saying, monogamy, any of that stuff. It's just saying, communicate about it, make sure it's appropriate, and consenting adults. Sex is maybe I will go off onto a tangent about sex, and because we're talking about attachment. Where do you get attached more? I don't know. Maybe, do you get attached anywhere more so than in intimate relationships?
If not, you're doing it wrong.
Says the man that's been married for like 30 years. It's good to still be attached after 30 years. What a challenging, I mean, the Buddha was just like, this is so difficult, I'm going to be celibate. How do we go into dating, into love, into sexuality without clinging? Now, I don't know if it's even possible. Theoretically, it's possible. Theoretically, it is possible to be sexual and intimate and with a non-attached connection. Most people are like, no fucking way. Theoretically. But to get to the level of non-attachment, to the level of not being more attached to pleasure than we are to pain, than we are, or aversive to pain. I heard the Dalai Lama once was asked about Buddhist tantric sexuality and this sort of like myth of Buddhists having sex without any attachment, the Tibetan tantras. And he said, our teachings say that it's possible. We have these tantric scriptures. He said, our teachings say that it's possible that you could have sex with a consort and as just a pure meditative practice. He said, but I don't know. He said, I know all of the highest lamas. He said, I'm the fucking Dalai Lama. I know all the homies. He said, I don't know anybody alive that could do it, that has that level of non-attachment, that has that level of realization. I think he used the term equanimity. And he used the example. He said, I think in order to call sex tantra, that level of tantra as non-attached, he said you'd have to have he used the term equanimity, where you had no preference over eating chocolate cake or dog shit. Now, when you can eat dog shit, you can call your sex tantra and have no preference and attachment to no, I really am attached to the chocolate cake. But we all have to admit we're attached to the chocolate cake or vanilla, whatever your flavor is. We crave it, we cling to it, we're repulsed by the disgusting poop. I'm not eating the dog shit. So the Buddha said, celibacy is way easier. If you're really committed to non-attachment, it'll be easier for you in this lifetime if you don't have sex. Do you believe that's true?
Just like you'd have less suffering if you didn't have children.
There are some Buddhists that would say that also. The comment here, I don't know if everybody at home could hear it, but my friend Bill said, just like there'd be less suffering if you didn't have children. That the attachment to our children, and to the point where in the Buddha's life, and who knows if this is true or myth or how religion kind of, it's 2,600 years ago. But according to the suttas, the Buddha named his son Rahula. Rahula means attachment. It's even worse than attachment. It means shackle. It means, what's the other word for shackle? Fetter. That our love for our children will fetter us, will shackle us because of the clinging that we will experience in relationship to our children. I have a friend who's a Dharma teacher, who was ended up having a child eventually, but all through her 20s and I think early 30s was a very serious meditator, going to retreat. She had this Burmese teacher who was her core teacher, and going to do 3-month courses and doing all of this practice. And at one point she, came to Burma and saw her Burmese teacher and said, "I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a child." And her teacher said, "Well, there's no hope for your liberation now, is there?" What a dick. So I'm not sure about all of this. I'd like to believe that we can get to, a level of non-attachment. Maybe we can't. I'm not sure if we can while engaged in sexuality and raising children and some of these things that are just, it's so hard to not be attached. What I've seen in my own practice is that I do this dance with attachment and non-attachment, where I think that without decades of meditation practice, I'd mostly just walk around the world like most people do, attached all of the time, craving and clinging and attached all of the time. But the training teaches us, as it has taught me on some levels, how to let go, even just for a moment, how to disengage from that clinging, and how to engage with pleasure, including sexuality, sometimes without clinging, and parenting without clinging. And not all of the time. Often I'm clinging and then I catch myself clinging, and rather than going right to, this is non-attachment. I want to make this point so clear. I hope everybody, I'm using my hands as non-attachment is connected presence with what's happening, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. And that we hear non-attachment and we think often that it means being separate from the experience. Is sort of like observing what's happening from a distance, like, oh, that's pleasant over there. That's not non-attachment, that's disengagement, that's detachment. That actually mindfulness is being intimate with our experience, connected to what we're doing while we're doing it, and feeling what it feels like and staying with it, even if it's pleasant, without trying to take it hostage. Staying with it, even if it's painful, without pushing it away. My own experience is that I'm just kind of constantly throughout the day doing this dance of clinging, detach, connect, clinging, detach, connect, clinging, this kind of over and over. And then having some periods of like, oh, I'm kind of hanging out in this connected, non-attached, especially when it's neutral, it's much easier to do that. Sometimes for me, I think, I don't know, I'd have to really analyze, and as it's an interesting question, are you able to stay more present with pain or more present with pleasure? If you really had a kind of statistical analysis of where you're at with your connected non-clinging, is it easier to stay present with the unpleasant experiences where you're just with it and you're just tending to it and you're just caring about it? That's the goal, without pushing it away. Or with the pleasant experiences, without clinging to it, forgetting over and over, forgetting this is impermanent, it's not worth clinging to. When it comes to pleasure, our goal, our aspiration is non-attached. Appreciation, enjoyment, connection, without clinging. So the precepts, I got off onto this tangent about sexuality and parenting, but part of the intervention, part of our discipline, what we have the meditative techniques, the 6th, 7th, and 8th factors of the Eightfold Path. And then we have the ethical aspects of the Eightfold Path, which is the 5 precepts. And somebody asked me, I saw the 5 precepts are not killing, not stealing, abstaining from sexual misconduct, not lying. And the 5th, and I forgot to mention this, abstaining from recreational drug and alcohol use. And the craving to create pleasure. Why do you drink? Why do you use? Because you want to create a temporary false pleasure for yourself. And the Buddha is saying renunciation around that. Both because it's a good discipline to not constantly be creating or even occasionally be creating a false sense of or a pleasure that is chemically induced. But also in support of the first 4 precepts, you're more likely to kill, lie, steal, sleep with somebody you shouldn't be sleeping with once you've had some drinks. So in support of the carefulness and mindfulness, stay sober. Not just for us recovering addicts in the community. This is the Buddha's teaching for everyone. Stay sober. If you want to stay mindful, if you want to be free, stay sober. Now, again, it's not a rule, it's not a commandment, it's a suggestion. If you want to get free, here's some good directions on how to get free.
He doesn't tell us, though, how long we need to do it so we know that we've gotten it.
What do you mean?
Well, like it took him 7 years. So when I get to 7 years, can I say I understand it then?
We all, so let me rephrase the question. I'm not sure everybody at home could hear you. I think that the question is, how do we know when we get there? Judy said he said the Buddha didn't tell us how long it would take us to get there, how we would know when we got there. We know when we get there when you're not suffering about anything anymore. So however long it takes, right? The goal is freedom from suffering, nirvana, extinguishing attachment, craving, greed, extinguishing, putting out hatred, aversion, resentment, extinguishing the fire of delusion, self-centered I, me, mine. So when you're free, you'll fucking know it for sure. Because you'll be like, wow, this is amazing. I'm not suffering anymore. I used to suffer about all of the clinging and aversion and self-centeredness. And now I've meditated to this place where no more suffering. So you'll know it. Now, yes, the way what's reported is that in that lifetime, Siddhartha Gautama attained full liberation, freedom from greed, hatred, and delusion, non-attached awakening in 7 years. And many subsequent lifetimes that brought him into that incarnation, is what it's taught. One time when the Buddha was asked, how long does it take? What's the minimum that you've ever seen anybody get enlightened? What's the fastest? He said, I think it's possible. Now, I'll give you the answer in a moment, but also in the suttas and the early teachings, there's people that hear one Dharma talk and then the immaculate eye of the Dharma arose within them and they were an arahant. One Dharma talk, not 7 years. But of course, those were all of these serious practitioners from, that had been doing the different Hindu asceticism and different practices, the fire worshippers and all of these different, that had been kind of going on what would be considered a little bit of a confused route, but when the Buddha explained the way that he saw it, they then understood and woke up. So they'd already been doing some training. They were serious yogis already. So anyways, he was asked how long, and his first answer was, well, it took me 7 years. And he says, but actually, if somebody was able to establish mindfulness, and an unbroken mindfulness, that it could be done in 7 months. Could you imagine 7 months of constant, present time, non-judgmental, kind awareness where you're, and maintaining that for half a year? And then he revised his answer and he said, actually, if you could maintain this mindfulness, consistent, seamless, unbroken mindfulness, I think he went down to 70 days. He said you could do it in 70 days. And then I think he went, anyways, he ends up, he says, final answer. If you could maintain mindfulness, maintain it, really turn your attention, all of the Dharma would be revealed and you would be liberated in 7 days. But can you even really do it for 7 minutes? Or 70 minutes or, 700 minutes? It's, to get to the place where we'd be constantly present without judging, without clinging, for 7 days. I can't do it. None of my teachers can do it. The Dalai Lama would say, I can't do it, not for 7 days straight. And he would, I don't like dog shit. I love chocolate cake. All right, I've gone on and on. And we're out of time. Nothing is worth clinging to. And we're going to keep clinging. So that's why we have the practices of humility and forgiveness, patience, perseverance, all of these other qualities. Because it's easy to be like, yeah, let go of everything. And then there's that Ajahn Chah, in this book, there's a quote from Ajahn Chah where he says even him and people who've been practicing it for their whole life, he said somewhere between 50 and 70% of the time, even for very advanced practitioners, you know what to do, but you can't quite do it. I hope that this kind of talk doesn't feel disillusioning. How it lands for me is, I don't know about perfect non-attachment or perfect enlightenment. What I do know is that I suffer so much less when I meditate and I practice the precepts and I try to live this path than without it. I don't know about becoming a perfect Buddha. I don't know about total non-attachment, but I like to try. And I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to keep doing the clinging, non-clinging, detaching dance. And hopefully I'll experience, and all of us will experience more and more periods of sustained, connected non-attachment and not suffering. We'll make progress, for sure. Guaranteed progress. I don't know about 100% perfection. Maybe. Class is done by donation. Against the Stream is a nonprofit organization that is supported by the generosity of you, people who attend, who tune in on Zoom. Many of you are monthly supporters. Thank you for your contributions. If you're not a monthly supporter and you're able to, on our website, there's a link in the chat here on Zoom to our website, where you go to the donations page and then you can say, oh, I'd like to give, I think there's options, $25, $50, $100 a month to the center, which would help us pay the rent here. And the reality is the donations that come in monthly, especially the last 8 or 9 months since COVID, but even before that, don't quite cover the expenses for the meditation center. Some of that still comes out of my pocket, so I'm not receiving any compensation for teaching. I'm actually helping to pay rent on the place. And this is after years of having been supported by the Sangha and having a salary and all of that stuff. But this last year, it hasn't been able to yet. Our Sangha hasn't regrown to the point where that's happening yet. Which I feel happy on many levels to contribute and to teach for out of the generosity and my love of the Dharma. And also I have financial concerns, and it would be good at some point to be supported by everybody so that there's more than just paying the rent happening here. So if you can give, please give generously. And if you can't, know that you're welcome here, regardless of ability to donate. That the doors are open, and that's why we don't charge for these things. We offer it as an offering, and then we receive the offerings that you like to offer in return. So thank you very much for your generosity. Sorry I didn't get to some of the questions online. Happy to hang out for a few minutes afterwards if people want to visit. And I will stop there. Last thing I'll say is offering the merit, may any goodness that comes from our practice be shared outward in all directions with all beings everywhere.